Radio would be my medium of choice if I had to choose just one to use forever. Podcasts are merely a continuation of it. In the 70s and 80s, radio was my best friend. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is Slaven Selection. I will be discussing a variety of topics in this weekly podcast, most of which are scientific in nature. I intend to keep this program as real and consistent as possible, but I will delve into some controversial topics as well. Like anything else, I prefer to think that organic growth is the best course of action. I know, these days everyone is podcasting. I still remember the blogging boom era and how very few of those early bloggers are still around. So for now, I'll keep it down to straightforward monologue format around 20 to 30 minutes long, maybe more. So in the future, I might increase the length of the show and to include some guests, and that will bring a new dimension to this show. Please be patient since I'm new to podcasting. But I've been a journalist for the most of my life. I was a TV reporter, radio presenter, columnist, editor, publisher, fiction writer, and translator. I also did some voice covering as well. So what you're hearing today, it is the result of all that combined with my lifelong passion with science, nature, and science fiction. So despite my intense desire to attend art school at a time, that was back in the 80s, I chose to study law because it was my father's wish. But later on, I got interested in a lot of different things. And it's funny how we always end up back where we started, with our first love. It was the universe to me. I have to say that without a strong backing of my grandfather, who was buying my monthly science fiction magazines, none of this would have been possible. You would be shocked if you knew him, but that is a tale for another day. Aside from the absurd quantity of science fiction I was reading, one Christmas I received a book titled Il romanzo dell'universo, or The Story of the Universe, written by Italian journalist and astronomer Giancarlo Massini. I now realize that it was likely one of the most significant books I have ever read. Not the best one, but certainly the most significant one. And it was a turning point in my life, a keyhole, yet another tale deserving of its own episode. I mean, I know a lot about the number of podcasts out there and how many of them generally offer quality content, but I'm also pretty sure I can contribute something. And indeed, UFOs, or as they are now known, UAPs, are the talk of the town on all the appropriate YouTube channels, and given the most recent developments, the phenomenon is probably just gonna get bigger. So everything for me started in the middle to late 1970s beneath the pure Adriatic sea skies, where I could see forever above us. Then there was the widespread UFO mythology of the time, which reached such a point that me and my neighbor at the time, we decided to build a UFO and convince others of its existence after making numerous unsuccessful attempts to spot one over Gardner Bay. Since frisbees were also popular at the time, we would wrap them in silver foil and toss them across the road at night while driving cars went by. Our desire was to believe and convince others to share our beliefs. Isn't that funny? I mean, the reality is that during the Croatian Independence War in May or June of 1992, I was stationed at a bunker close to the town of Sisak and came the closest I have ever been to experience like something similar to a UFO encounter. My platoon mate and I were smoking behind the bunker. Yes, I was still smoking at the time. We were drinking coffee also in the late afternoon when something, and I can't even begin to describe it, made a subsonic whoosh over the bunker. It was a gorgeous sunny day with no artillery shelling, shooting, or anything of the sort. No explosion later on, no shadows. So we exchanged glances and realized we were completely taken aback. Years later, we concluded after the war that it must have been something like a really big owl or something like that, a bird. But when was the last time you saw or heard an owl flying during the day over a marsh that had been devastated by fighting? An owl, yes. Oh, please, let's not joke about Twin Peaks or Mike Cleland. So I must remind you that in the past, drones, as we know them today, did not exist. At the brigade level, we presumably have just one remotely controlled aircraft, and it was really, really noisy. Well, that's what happened to me when I was 22 years old. Neither one of us did have hallucinations, so was it a UAP? I doubt it. So, first things first, before I begin, let me take you, or let me just say that, like, I have to be very clear about it. I absolutely appreciate mysteries that have no clear explanation, but I absolutely detest sensationalism, fanaticism, fringe science, nonsense, and plain old attention seeking. Like, I can't stand people who will lie to garner attention. If there is no concrete evidence to support an urban legend or modern myth, or even just a hint that a specific theory or hypothesis might be true, then these claims are worthless. So I think my BS radar is pretty good because of my curiosity and some decent journalism experience. But I still find it hard to believe that even at the age of 10, I fell for Eric von Daniken stories. However, it's just not charlatans who tell lies. Some fairly well known anthropologists have been accused of it as well. That's why I always say four eyes doctrine is important. Here I'm not referring to five eyes. This relates to the ancient Roman proverb. So, if extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, how will we know when we reach the point where, quotes, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic? Is it truly a diversion from something significant, something real? So, how did all of this start unwrapping for Canadians? It's a March of 2023, and Manitoba MP Lara Maguire briefed Canadian Minister of Defense Anita Anand on UFOs ahead of US Intel report. But here's the question before we go any further. Is DRDC, or Defense Research and Development, a Canadian equivalent of US DARPA? Are they really in possession of non-human biologics, or technology, or alien material as previously stated by Manitoba MP? Or does UAP material simply means Chinese spook balloons? Are the UFOs really publicly traceable to 1950s in Canada? Apparently, there is a document from the meeting of Project Magnet with Wilbert Smith and Robert Sarbacher, where he got briefed on the subject. What they talked about was classified higher than the H bomb at the time. Even back then, Canadian and US scientists were exchanging information on this incredible mystery. So, from what I understand, when it comes to Dr. Whitney Lackenbauer, a leading authority in the study of the Canadian North and team member of the North American and Arctic Defense Security Network, he certainly don't believe that recent incidents were the UFOs or UAPs, but Chinese surveillance. And I have to say that is a probable cause of it, if nothing else, at least the most recent events. Furthermore, Canada's Chief Science Advisor has launched Canada Sky program, which is pretty much the same as IRA project in the US. Although, as the disclaimer on the web page goes, it should be noted that a Sky Canada project is not intended to access and collect first-hand data like photos, testimonies, etc., nor is it intended to make the Office of the Chief Science Advisor the main point of contact for Canadians wishing to report observations or personal experiences. Furthermore, it is not meant to prove or disprove the existence of extraterrestrial life or extraterrestrial visitors. So I wonder, how is that related to Terry Maguire, who in his letter from March of 2023, again, informed Anita Anand, who was Minister of Defense at the time. Maguire called for more parliamentary oversight and for Anand and the Canadian government to develop a public communication plan ahead of what he termed upcoming public revelations, whatever that might be. So, according to Dr. Michael Sala from exopolitics.org, the context of Maguire's letter to Anand was that Canada and New Zealand have been left out of Five Eyes progress when it comes to UAPs, and that the Canada would look foolish if they don't start being as transparent as US, UK, and Australia when it comes to alleged reverse engineering projects. Furthermore, he implied that Australia is actively participating in those secret projects in some desolated areas of the continent. I guess it's Woomera or something like that. And he also believes that Germany had secret bases in Antarctica at the end of the Second World War, for which I have no proof of, but it does sound Denikanish to me. Very close to ideas of Dr. Stephen Greer, so I don't really know what to think. On the other side, with the news that Canada's Minister of Defense was briefed about the issue of unidentified aerial phenomena, maybe it's time for parliamentarians and the government of Canada to take this issue seriously, especially considering the fact that UAPs they tracked were going incredibly fast, with an estimate of at least 700 to 900 G forces on the object. I don't think anyone can survive this. Radar has picked them up going thousands of miles per hour and documenting them doing a 90-degree turn on a dime without losing any speed. There is nothing in any country's inventory which could withstand those G-forces. Some of them were tracked going from low Earth orbit into the upper atmosphere and then under the ocean. So here is my question. With Canada's sky or not, are we capable of monitoring and defending our skies without NORAD? I don't think so. And then there is Transport Canada. Yes, the one who were behind the Magnet project established in December of 1950, who has their own pile of reports submitted by pilots. But somehow, for unknown reasons, none of that information has ever been handed over to Parliament, nor is there any evidence of meaningful attempts to investigate these reports. And then also there was a Project Second Story or Project Flying Saucers or Project Theta, which began on April 22nd in 1952 to deal with material concerning flying saucers. Those are long gone, but today there is nothing comparable to those. Even Sky Canada is not going they're not going the same way. So, according to some sources, NAV Canada, a Canadian civil air navigation system operator, is a private, non-profit company or civilian navigation service provider. You know those guys who are giving you drone flight authorizations? So NAV wasn't willing to provide any information on the subject, which is borderline bizarre if you ask me. A private nonprofit? Are they a public charity organization? Private nonprofit owns public air control infrastructure? Strange. I guess they're really good at heart, or maybe it's the actual information that is really, really valuable here. Are we on the same page? And also, it's actually the Herzberg Institute of Astrophysics in Ottawa that typically deals with analyzing everything, and then the RCMP creates a file from the information gathered, and so on. But when former Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney, cut the budget in 95, or was it 96, I don't remember, nothing has been happening ever since, and that is crazy. Very few people actually paid attention to what's going on up there. One of them, a California nuclear physicist, later naturalized Canadian, who at the time back in the 70s was the only known scientist to be devoting full time to UFOs instead of working within the space program on different projects, including the one on nuclear rocket engine for the private industry sponsored by the US government. I wonder what Dan Aykroyd would have to say about that. He apparently saw two glowing white discs flying side by side in Montreal more than 30 years ago. They crossed the entire sky in about 20 seconds. 4 other people saw these discs with him, and he estimated that they were flying approximately 5,000 miles per hour. I don't know how he knows that. I can't say how authentic this he's seeing is. People see different things all the time. Still, there are many other witnesses, and I would rather talk to someone trained in analytical observation than to a sci-factor host. So let's briefly explore Canadian seeings by province and keep in mind that the Canadian UFO Survey was initiated in 1989 and documents reported sightings annually. I do agree it's not practical to keep a separate Canadian file on the UFOs compared to the US. However, this is not about convenience, but more like, having our own analysis of the UAPs. So in Canada, most reports of unidentified flying objects are captured by procedures known as communications instructions for reporting vital intelligence sightings, or service for short. Canada triggered a flurry of alerts that link air traffic controllers, government officials at Transport Canada, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. 22nd Wing North Bay, also known as the Canadian Air Defence Sector, is responsible for providing surveillance, identification, control, and warning for the aerospace defense of Canada and North America at the Sector Air Operations Center. According to the government website, this surveillance and identification air traffic approaching North America, 200,000 flights per year, is accomplished using radar information received via satellite from the North Warning System across the Canadian Arctic, coastal radars on the east and west coast of Canada, and airborne warning and control system aircraft. All aircrafts, or UAPs for that matter, penetrating this radar coverage are detected and identified by the personnel of the 21st Aerospace Control and Warning Squadron. Unidentified flying objects might be intercepted by Hornet fighters. Well, I was kind of hoping for Arrow, but hey, who's bold enough to oppose U.S. military-industrial complex, right? Diffenbaker, this one is on you. So let's go back to NAV Canada, a private non-profit company that owns and operates the country's civilian air traffic control infrastructure. It tends to be the first point of contact when service or communications instructions for reporting vital intelligence sightings reports are made. The company even puts unidentified flying objects at the beginning of a list of service examples that also include foreign submarines and warships. When a service report is made, NAV Canada personnel notify federal aviation authorities at Transport Canada and a Royal Canadian Air Force squadron in North Bay, Ontario, that's affiliated with NORAD, the Joint Canada-US Defense Group, and this is where the 21st Aerospace Control and Warning Squadron in the North Bay comes to focus. These guys are the top guns for situations like this. The squadron monitors NORAD radar feeds and is responsible for identifying all air traffic approaching the country. Also, 22nd Base in North Bay coordinates everything with Cheyenne Base in Colorado. Service reports are infrequently reported to Transport Canada, as the reports received are a result of natural phenomena such as fireballs, weather balloons, and meteors. From what I heard, Canada's military isn't as dismissive, but generally considers UFOs to be outside their purview. 21st Squadron motto is "Intruders Beware." To me, it sounds like a Will Smith quote. So, before we briefly go over our promises, please be aware that, interestingly enough, no significant reports have been found in Nunavut and Northwest Territories. The list is far from being complete, so it's just a general overview. Remember, coast to coast, Canada has over 1,000 reported UAPs cases annually. Alberta is ready to go. There is even a cosmodrome in St. Paul, a town of about 5,000 resting between Edmonton and the Saskatchewan border, which was built there 45 years ago. It was at a point in time when North Americans everywhere were optimistic about the possibility of space travel, exploration, and maybe meeting alien species. A very interesting case out of Camrose, which proves it was Canada, not Britain, where government first investigated crop circles. It occurred outside of Camrose, Alberta in August of 1967, when several deep impressions were made in an unknown object in a pasture. Another one was at a coal lake in Alberta, where on the night of September 14, 1981, a lit-up object flew through Canadian Forces Base, Cold Lake, restricted area at roughly 6,000 feet without being picked up on radar. Then, in recent times, Alberta air traffic controllers spotted a solid bright light too fast to be a commercial aircraft. Then, in December 2009, a Manitoba police officer records a yellow and orange UAP light with their cruiser's dashcam. In April 2011 and in April 2018, Cargo Flight from New York to Alaska reported an object flying sporadically and moving at Mach 4 over northern Canada. Then 2020, there was like 150 UFO reports filed, and in 2021, the number went down to about 75. So the pandemic had an effect, I guess. The Alberta Center received close to a million calls last year, and it's the unusual one, not requiring police, fire, or EMS to be sent out, that tend to stand out in the minds of the 160 dispatchers. British Columbia has second highest number of UFO sightings in Canada, and they even have a webpage dedicated to it. So at ufobc.ca, you can find everything you want to know about it. According to their statement, their mandate is to gather and investigate BC and Yukon-based UFO sighting reports and to make the public aware of the phenomenon. Another interesting source from BC is at cottoneye.mountainculture.com. I hope I pronounced it right. Manitoba, yeah. When it comes to Manitoba, a new report suggests UFO sightings in Manitoba are older than the province itself, and allegedly it dates all the way back to 1792. Ufology research based in Winnipeg says there have been just over 2,000 reports of UFO in Manitoba over the past 200 years. The earliest documented encounter came from two explorers, Davy Thompson and Andrew Davy, who were in northern Manitoba where they said they saw several bizarre meteors crash into the ice. Thompson's diary details how the two were surprised one night by a brilliant meteor of globular form that appeared larger than the moon. It struck the river ice with a sound like a massive jelly, was dashed into an innumerable luminous pieces, and instantly expired. The next morning, they went to see what marks this meteor had made on the ice, but could not discover that a single particle was marked. And probably one of the most famous cases was the one at Falcon Lake on May 20th, 1967, when Stephen Michalak was near Falcon Lake at 12:15 p.m. when he saw one of the two disc-shaped objects land on a large flat rock. He sketched the vessel and eventually approached it and heard two human-like voices. Then he was hit by hot gas, which set his clothes on fire. His ailments later included weight loss, peculiar burn marks on his chest and stomach, charred hair, an odd rash, and recurrent dizziness. Some radiation was found at the site. Later on, the same year, in July of 1967, the Department of Transportation reported that a UAP, the unidentified target, was tracked through 7 sweeps of the radar witnessed by 3 controllers and 2 technicians some 70 miles east of Winnipeg. It increased from a speed of 720 knots to 3,600 knots. That is bonkers. In 1 minute, and on the same day in Kenora, Ontario, a similar object was picked up on the radar. Could it be the same thing? I don't know. So we go on, like April 10, 1975, Bob and Elaine Deemer were walking from their farmhouse to their private airfield in Carman, and they saw a big red light coming at them. It had a dome on top of, and it was pulsing. The Deemers continued to see saucer-shaped objects a few more times. Then starting May 7, 1975, nightly sightings began that lasted for months. Then on March 4, 1977, they saw, like somebody was driving eastward towards his farm near sundown when he saw a vibrating and shimmering oval source of light about 5 meters directly ahead of him. It made no noise and did not look to be solid. So he continued driving and came upon their 3 quotation mark people standing on the road before him. John Patrick McNamus, who served in the Canadian Armed Forces from 1960 to 1984, was with 2 other soldiers when he spotted a UFO at Canadian Force Base in Shiloh in Manitoba in the spring of 1981. 200 kilometers to the east, while sunbathing near a runway at Canadian Force Base around Winnipeg in June of 1985, John Williams claims he saw what he described as the single brightest object in the sky next to the sun. On October 9, 1989, a family was visiting the Fort White Nature Center at 2:50 in the afternoon when they saw a white boomerang-shaped object hanging in the air over Winnipeg. The object slowly rotated and showed a bulge on its underside. Furthermore, on November 1st, 1992, Karen, a nurse living in Winnipeg, was wakened at about 2 a.m. by a loud thump on her door. She got up and found 2, so to speak, little people in the living room. Then 2012 at 7 p.m., two witnesses in Winnipeg observed a flat disc-shaped object with red lights around its perimeter. It was flying along horizontally but turned on its side and darted towards their vehicle. The latest reported Manitoba sightings found most occurred during the summer months between 10 p.m. and midnight. I believe that is the case everywhere you go. So now we have New Brunswick. So we are back to Freedman's territory, whose fans were over the moon about a new UFO exhibit that opened in 2022 at the Fredericton Region Museum. So it's 2014 in Kensington. While putting on a bonfire late in the evening of June 4th, John Shepard witnessed unusual lights in the sky over the Gulf of St. Lawrence and captured 22 minutes of it on his cell phone. After reporting the incident to MUFON, CBC covered the event. The next day, media released a follow-up article in which a series of alternative explanations for the event were presented. So even the military have responded to sightings. One incident is detailed in a September 3rd, 2018 email, which was unclassified in December, sent by a Halifax-based Air Force captain to a slew of senior Canadian military officers with the words UFO/sighting in the subject line. The email describes a cormorant search and rescue helicopter being dispatched to the coast of Prince Edward Island after a concerned citizen saw something fall in the water and could neither confirm nor deny having a person on board. The cormorant and a boat from a local fire department searched the area that night but found nothing. Okay, so Newfoundland and Labrador. The 5th Wing Goose Bay Air Force Base also reported multiple strange lights in the sky, including on June 22nd, 1953, when a pilot and his radar operator saw a red light flying at an estimated 1,700 miles per hour. The flying object eluded the chasing F-94 after 5 minutes. In 1978, Melita Dyson was 18 and working as a nurse at Nurses Aid in Black Tickle, Labrador, at the nursing station. It was the evening of November 13 when she saw something strange outside, just as the sun was setting. Dyson called over the nurse, Elizabeth McKibben, who called more people from around the community to take a look. In an interview with CBC Radio from the same year, McKibben said she looked at the object through binoculars and saw that it was like a bright red, orangey colored object that gave off trails and shrouded in red light. Then a second, larger saucer-shaped object came into view and connected on top of the first. They both stayed in the sky for about 14 minutes before leaving into the night. Cartwright RCMP officers Greg Dorkin and Sidney Elson responded in the days followed to investigate. RCMP documents obtained by an access to information request showed the RCMP asking if a plane could have been in the area or a satellite could have crashed. RCMP reports showed that no debris was found. And of course, there is a famous Random Island UFO sighting that was immortalized on coin. A strange object seen in the skies near Clarenville in 1978 might not be any closer to being explained, but its eeriness is now immortalized in a glowing coin from the Royal Canadian Mint. Just 5 days before Halloween in that year, people spotted a brightly lit object in the sky near Random Island. They called police, and the Clarenville RCMP constable who responded remained at a loss along with the onlookers as the oval shape hovered for about an hour before vanishing. On the 27th of October, Blackwood received a call from dispatch that a resident had reported a UFO sighting in progress. At the time of the call, Blackwood was on the other side of the town, so he made his way down Marine Drive, where he met the resident, Mr. Lethbridge, his wife, and several other locals. Blackwood said that he looked into the sky and saw an object coming from the west, heading eastwards, flying at least 2,000 to 3,000 feet in altitude. At this time, Blackwood's impression was that it was simply a jet flying overhead. Lethbridge gave Blackwood his binoculars for a closer look, and then the 25-year-old officer saw something strange hovering over the area that he identified as District of Weybridge. At this time, Blackwood could still not identify the object, so he sent a dispatch and asked for an industrial telescope that the police usually have for narcotic surveillance. The telescope was brought from the detachment office with another officer and was positioned looking towards the northeast coast of nearby Random Island. Through the telescope lens, Blackwood noticed that there were strange blue lights on either side of the object and a red one on the top of the object, but it did not appear at this time to be shaped like a plane. The bottom half of the object was completely illuminated by a white light at this time. The blue light were flashing very rapidly, much more rapidly than any other craft had ever seen. So Officer Blackwood watched it at max range for a while, focusing on the top of the craft, now trying to figure out what the shape of the craft really was. The UFO appeared to be an oval shape with a triangular jutting out of the back that was described as a pyramid shape. So more recently, multiple people in the town of Postville saw strange flying objects in 2008 and 2010 when a UFO was spotted in January. The document contains grainy image of a rocket with the long fiery tail soaring skyward. The reports rule out missiles and model rockets, but don't suggest what the images might show. Military experts discredit the possibility of ballistic and cruise missiles. D&D's Directorate of Scientific and Technical Intelligence, DSTI, assessed the images and reported the object is not a ballistic missile, not a cruise missile in a boost phase, nor a cruise missile in a flight phase. It is also not a licensed model rocket launcher. On the January 25th, sighting happened on the southern coast near Harbor Mile. Several residents reported seeing the objects, including a woman who was able to photograph one of them. She reported to the RCMP that she had seen 3 missiles soaring over the ocean, and it looked as if they had come up out of the water. The DSTI says in the documents that the only missiles that can be launched from a submarine are ballistic or cruise missiles, but the country top arms expert says the object photographed doesn't fit that profile. So now, Northwest Territories, which is, I have very little info about it, almost nothing, same as Nunavut. So we'll come back to there like some other time. Nova Scotia. Hundreds of UFO sightings are reported across Canada every year, but none has the paper trail of Shag Harbor. At the time, the area was the location for a top secret U.S. military base, disguised as an oceanographic institute. The facility used underwater microphones and magnetic detection devices to track enemy submarines, but its true purpose wasn't revealed until the 1980s. A glowing orange sphere about the size of a city bus bobbed on the waves about 300 meters from shore and then slipped beneath the surface without a sound. On the night of October 4, 1967, witnesses reported seeing a large, brightly lit object descending and crashing into the waters near Shag Harbor. No wreckage was found. Then, December 23, 2018, a fisherman in the Bay of Fundy and a woman at home in Yarmouth both contacted a search and rescue center to report a light that was yellow, steady, and hovering high above the Atlantic Ocean. When Royal Canadian Air Force personnel reviewed radar data from NORAD, they observed 3 primary radar hits that correlated almost exactly to the time and location of the sighting. The next sighting was seen by an RCMP corporal near Barrington Passage. The officer described seeing an object about 60 feet in length with white lights flying over the water at a low altitude. The object started making a high-pitched whistling sound and slammed into the water, leaving only one white light visible. Officer Vereski approached the light by boat, and it rapidly sunk underneath him as he got close. The area was then searched by the Canadian Coast Guard and other boats, but nothing was found. All right, so there is none of it which is the largest and the northernmost territory of Canada. However, in Nunavut, there is very little to talk about. It is Canada's only geopolitical region that is not connected to the rest of North America by highway, and it's even less densely populated than Denmark's Greenland. If anyone knows what's going on there, must be Americans. So, Ontario, the first case was apparently the hoax, and it happened on August 1914 at Georgian Bay. William Keel and others saw a spherical craft on the surface of the water. On its deck were two small men wearing green-purple clothes. On the opposite side were three men dressed in light brown, wearing square masks down to their shoulders. Seeing the witnesses, they re-entered the craft except for one dwarf wearing shoes with a curved pointed tip, who remained outside while the craft rose 3 meters above the water and shot upward, leaving a short trail. Nice story. The second one happened on January 1st in 1931 in Cobden. UFO was sighted in early morning, had bright light on front which lit up treetops with flashing lights. Object made sweeping curves, sped up, and climbed out of sight. But let's talk about more recent times. One of the Canadian military oldest UFO reports come from April 12, 1952, at what was then called RCF Station North Bay. I guess it's still there. That night, two officers caught sight of something apparently round, like an amber traffic light that moved at a very great rate of speed comparable to twice the speed of Sabre jet fighter, and then skidded to a stop, reverse direction, and disappeared at a greater rate of speed on reversal than on approach. The intelligence officer who interviewed the witnesses noted that the abrupt reversal of direction observed conveyed the idea that it was most strange and worthwhile reporting. Then Clearwater Bay from 1973, the next case outlined in the briefing is focused on a family that was returning to their home by boat when they encountered a UFO. According to the briefing, the object appeared about 50 feet away, so they decided to investigate it. When they approached the object, moved towards them, so they retreated. Then the object returned to its original spot. And again, we are back to 2000s, just after dark. Yes, after dark, but not the movie festival. It was after dark on November 27th of 2002. There was an observation on Nord radar of a large tubular object between 37 and 47,000 feet in the area of Chicago, which was moving towards the Thunder Bay area in northwestern Ontario. Then there are loads of civilian sightings too, such as a large glowing object seen hovering quite quickly back and forth just above the tree line near Peterborough, Ontario, in January 2011. Then on Saturday, July 26, 2014, there were multiple UFO sightings reports in North York, and on July 26, they witnessed a string of 6 or 7 diagonal flashing lights in the sky. Toronto's Police 32nd Division reported receiving several calls on the unidentified flying objects that night, and even some police officers witnessed the lights. And February 21st, 2021, an American Airlines flight from New Mexico called air traffic controllers after seeing a long cylindrical object moving really fast right over the top of us. Okay, Saskatchewan, July 1929. 5 people saw a huge ball of light giving off fiery colors 25 kilometers from Robsart. It landed slowly, vanished gradually after illuminating the whole countryside for 30 minutes. Robsart was incorporated as a village in 1912. In 1917, the town opened its own public hospital, which still stands today. At its boom, it had over 350 people. Today, it's a ghost town. Sadly, the town dissolved in 2002. The population today is around 20 people. On November 7, 1967, a sergeant noticed a very bright light at an altitude of 3,000 to 4,000 feet with what appeared to the observer as a small moon at the outer perimeter of light. I hope I got it right. When it began moving, it appears to the observer to be elongated in shape before it rapidly disappeared upward. And on February 19, in 1969, in Bangui, a witness felt tingling sensations. There was a dome disk with ports maneuvered around farm emitting high-pitched whine. Dog cowered in snow, cattle bolted. An event from the night of November 21st, 2008 describes Canadian Armed Forces personnel notifying civilian air traffic controllers of a UFO east of Regina, Saskatchewan. The object was stationary with bright white lights and had been observed on previous occasions. The reports also include what are clearly drone, meteor, balloon, and satellite sightings like the one on December of 2019, when Air Canada Express flight reported 40 lights in the sky traveling in groups of 15, which was very likely then relatively uncommon constellation of SpaceX Starlink satellites. Others almost seem psychedelic, like a San Walburg, Saskatchewan resident who notified an Air Force base in October 2020 of thousands of diamond shaped objects passing overhead at the very high rate of speed. Et maintenant, parlons un peu du Québec. While Montreal Gazette is claiming that Quebec leads the country in sightings of UFOs, the reality is much closer to what Daily Hive is saying, which is that Quebec is the least likely province in all of Canada to spot a UFO. Quebec has only 102 recorded sightings out of a population of over 8 million. Last year's February, with seeing very strange lights in the sky, high above the flight paths that were moving in a rapid and irregular way. That was an exception. Something similar was spotted in Yellowknife just a couple of days before. According to National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena at NICAP.org, one case stands out, which was on June 12, 1929, in Fermeneuve, or is it Fermeneuve? I don't know. 20 years old Louis Brosseau was returning home when he saw a dark object with yellow light, and his horse became very nervous. Within 6 meters of the object, 4 or 5 dwarfish figures were running back and forth. He heard their pointed, childlike voices, then saw the dark object take off with a machine-like sound and a rush of air. Estimated size of the object was 15 meters in diameter, and it was 5 meters high. What happened in Montreal on November 7th of 1990 was most likely a rooftop pool reflection. Sorry, Dan Aykroyd. So that was it. And Yukon, finally, the first recorded UFO sighting in Yukon, from what I know, was by Billy Blair and cousin Jimmy near Snag on September 17 and 18 in 1958. Then on January 2nd, 1968, Whitehorse, there was a bright light pulsating yellow-orange object nearby, and apparently the heat was felt with electromagnetic effects on witnessed snowmobile. But then again, there is very little on Yukon, and the website that is taking care of BC cases, ufobc.ca, does the same for the province or for Yukon. So considering it's a founds page where anyone can post, I'll give you just a few examples. On January 25th, 2007, allegedly there was a case of green and orange light above Tagish Lake, but most likely it was a meteorite. On February 5th, the same year, strange lights above Dawson City. August 21st, bright light above Whitehorse. Then on December 11th, 1996, at a Fox Lake on the Klondike Highway close to Fox Lake, both of them slammed on the brakes, stopping about 570 meters apart from each other. The UFO proceeded to slowly drift towards the second vehicle, and after a few minutes, he found himself almost directly underneath the object. The UFO continued to move slowly across the highway and out over the hill to the east and eventually disappeared behind it. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was provided a classified memo on the subject of the UAPs that was detected and shot down over Yukon on February 11, 2023. According to the so-called secret memo, the Yukon object was the 23rd UAP tracked over North America in the first few weeks of that year. NORAD numbers objects on a sequential basis per year to track every detected object that is not immediately identified. Upon cross-examination, most objects are found to be innocuous and do not meet the threshold for high reporting or engagement. Object number 23, function, method, or propulsion or affiliation to any nation state remains unverified. Canada's Navy has encountered UFOs too. like on the morning of August 21st, 1968, when crew aboard a pair of destroyers in the Pacific Ocean spotted multiple bright objects flying in formation, and so on. The list go on and on and on. I won't continue because it's a fan page, not a super credible official report. If you want to read it yourself, visit ufobc.ca. The question is, will the future hold up to our expectations in terms of illuminating UAPs? Can Sky Canada put us at the forefront of UAPs research? We'll find out in time. I appreciate you listening to my podcast today. There are things I do for love, and these are things I do for love. And that is all I have to say for today. Recall that people can be recognized by the podcasts they enjoy. Please, crowd, stay selective, and you intruders, beware.